Quarterback U is a phrase people throw around in trying to describe what college or university is the best at producing NFL quarterbacks, but people who try to find this answer never really come up with a concrete one. That's what I'm here to do. I picked 20 schools that I thought had the best chance of competing to be quarterback U and graded them on 14 categories and ranked them. I'll show you my rankings in a bit. Before that happens, I need to say a few things. First of all, this video took me a while to make. That's why I haven't uploaded the past couple of days, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I can keep you entertained. Second of all, players that count as QBs, because some players have multiple positions. If at least one of your positions is QB, then you will count for this list. And the 14 criteria points I'm grading them on, or ranking them on rather, is amount of players, MVPs, Super Bowl MVPs, winning Super Bowl starts, win percentage, Pro Bowls, All-Pro first team appearances, pass yards, touchdown to interception ratio, completion percentage, rush touchdowns, rush yards, weighted career average, and number of Hall of Famers. Number of Hall of Famers may be a little controversial because I'm only adding people that are currently in the Hall of Fame. So, guys like Tom Brady don't count yet. And you may be like, that's ridiculous. Why does Tom Brady count? I don't know. Maybe it turns out he's cheating like his whole career. I had to redo this video, so I'm only doing the top 15 teams. So at 15 is Boston College. Boston College led by Matt Ryan, Doug Flutie, and Matt Hasselbeck. They just, those three quarterbacks are really good. Just besides that, they don't really have that many players that really help them in any way. It's really just those three, and the stats of those three are basically this whole team's stats. 18 players have been from Boston College, but they really fail to excel at many things in the rankings, which is why they placed 15th. In the 14th spot is Tennessee. So Tennessee, Peyton Manning really does much of the heavy lifting, and that alone really puts them in a great place. Besides that, they haven't really had that many QBs that were like Pro Bowlers or Super Bowl winners or anything. It's really just Peyton Manning. Now, currently, and in terms of future, they do have 3 active players. That's Robert Joshua Dobbs, Joe Milton, and Hendon Hooker. In the 13th spot is Pitt. Pitt, at first you may be like, oh yeah, Dan Marino, and he does a lot of the heavy lifting, but Joe Flacco also actually went there before he transferred to Delaware, which those two alone contribute most of Pitt's success. Currently, Kenny Pickett is really the only quarterback from Pitt, and that's not necessarily a great thing. Pitt is the 4th best team in completion percentage, and that is really their best category. Besides that, they kind of fall to mediocre to below average on most of them. In the 12th spot is USC, which is actually kind of underperforming. USC is 2nd in total players. They're 2nd in passing yards, and they're also top 3 in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. But in all the other categories, they're so horrendously terrible that they somehow drop out of the top 10. Carson Palmer is really the most notable quarterback to come from USC. Currently, Sam Darnold and Caleb Williams are from USC, so the future is kind of bright. In the 11th slot is Oregon, and Oregon has had many good players through many decades. Norm Van Brocklin and Dan Fouts are both Hall of Famers that played in the 60s, and then Dan Fouts more in the 80s. And then currently, guys like Justin Herbert are really good as well. Marcus Mariota and Bo Nix are also in the NFL. That just those players really do most of it. Besides the few, really good players, the other guys don't really do much. 18 players have came from here, and they place 4th or top 5 in MVPs, Pro Bowls, and All-Pro first appearances. But even then, they still are not top 10 in the quarterback U conversation. Actually, looking back at it now, they are in the top 10 conversation because they're tied with Georgia. They actually have the same amount of points. In Georgia, Fran Tarkenton's really their best player. He's their only Hall of Famer. But Matt Stafford went there too, and he puts up lots of numbers, and I don't know if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame or not. That's kind of one of the main reasons why I didn't, have players that aren't actively in the Hall of Fame. I didn't put them as Hall of Famers because there's some guys that are just 50-50. With only 12 players, Georgia actually doesn't even rank high in most of the categories, except rushing yards, where they are top 5. But besides that, they're not really that high. Their only active players are Matt Stafford and Justin Fields, because Justin Fields went there before he transferred to Ohio State. In the 9th slot, it's BYU, and I have seen some people label this as quarterback U. Steve Young really does a lot of the conversation because of that, and he had a really great career where he won Super Bowls, made Pro Bowls, and was actually a pretty good rusher, which helped them get those numbers up. They also had Super Bowl winning guys like Jim McMahon, who's also a Pro Bowler. Currently, they have some studs like Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall, so the future's bright there. I'm being sarcastic if you can't tell, but they're just kind of more advanced than Oregon and Georgia, but still really, they're never really top in any of the categories. They just kind of are better than some of the worst teams. In number 8, it's Louisville, and Louisville was actually last place out of all 20 teams I looked at in passing yards. So you may wonder how they did so good. Well, they had Lamar Jackson, Johnny Unitas, and also Pro Bowler Teddy Bridgewater. But Lamar Jackson and Johnny Unitas helped to make Louisville first overall in number of MVPs and first team All-Pros. This single-handedly kind of launched them high. They're also pretty solid in the rushing yards category because of Lamar Jackson, and Johnny Unitas was also a pretty decent rusher. And the 7th is Alabama. Alabama is first in Hall of Famers with Bart Starr, Joe Namath, and Ken Stabler. After those guys, though, those guys were all kind of in the same era. After that, though, they kind of went on a dry spell. They didn't really have that many great QBs until kind of recently. They currently have, I think, 5 dudes in the league: Bryce Young, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, and even A.J. McCarron was still playing in some games last year. Bama is also in first place for amount of Super Bowl starts where the quarterback wins, but a couple bad categories hold them back. Number 6, Stanford. So, John Elway, Andrew Luck, John Brody, and what's his name? Jim Plunkett. Those guys all really make this team a really good contender. Not quite top 5, but they're pretty close. Stanford does place top 5 in amount of players, amount of Super Bowl MVPs, amount of MVPs, amount of Super Bowl starts, and amount of rushing touchdowns. They just aren't really first in anything, which holds them back from being in the top 5. Now we're looking into the top 5 universities in the conversation to be quarterback U. And at the 5 slot, it's NC State. NC State actually has the least amount of players on this list with 9. That's pretty bad, but all the players are pretty significant. Roman Gabriel, who you're seeing now, was an MVP in the 70s. He put up numbers. They had Phillip Rivers and Russell Wilson went there before he transferred to Wisconsin. Those 3 seriously help the accolades aspect as well as the numbers aspect. They even had some solid players such as Jacoby Brissett go there. It really makes NC State really a contender, even though they don't have the least amount of players. They still put up 170,000 passing yards, which is top 5, as well as being pretty good in all the other categories. Pound for pound, they may be the best. And in the 4 slot, it's California. So, Aaron Rodgers is the main candidate from here. He really helps a lot with all his numbers. The 4 MVPs makes them top 3, as well as guys like Jared Goff. Even guys like Kyle Buller and Craig Morton were longtime starters in the NFL and were able to put up good numbers. That's really what makes Cal a top, 5 contender. 18 players came from Cal, and really they're more consistent. They're consistently pretty highly rated, but they're never really the best. They never ranked the best in anything. I think their highest ranking was 3rd place. Now, before I reveal the order, I'll show you the main candidates for quarterback university, again, in no order. So the top 3, in no order: Notre Dame, Purdue, and Michigan. Starting off with Notre Dame, at first you may be like, well, they're not that good. How are they top 3? No, their history expands really well. I know I'm a Notre Dame fan, but just trust me. They're first place in amount of players, They're also first place in rushing touchdowns and rushing yards, as well as third place in passing yards. And they've had a bunch of MVPs, bunch of Super Bowl MVPs, bunch of Pro Bowlers. They really have all the accolades as well. And that's made possible by guys like Joe Theismann, Joe Montana, obviously, Daryl LaMonica, and, other Pro Bowlers like Steve Berline, who's probably the most recent dude that's really good. Back then, MVPs sometimes threw more interceptions than touchdowns. So a lot of these really good players are really old. So their touchdown to interception ratio is third to last, and their completion percentage is actually last. But even with those massive weights, they're still in the conversation to be quarterback university. Recently, they have been pretty terrible. Their last four Notre Dame quarterbacks in the NFL have been Ian Book, Deshaun Kaiser, Brady Quinn, and Jimmy Clausen. Coming in now, Sam Hartman is technically an undrafted free agent. Their future isn't looking that bright, but their past history really makes them a contender for quarterback university. Then moving on to Purdue. At first, it may seem like, they just have Drew Brees. That's not true at all. They have two Hall of Fame quarterbacks besides Drew Brees. That's Len Dawson and Bob Grease, who both won Super Bowls, both made many Pro Bowls. Bob Grease even won an MVP. Purdue is first place in Pro Bowls. They are also first place in passing yards with 244,000. Second place has 198,000. That's how dominant they are. And even the Purdue quarterbacks that aren't Hall of Famers like Drew Brees, Bob Grease, and Len Dawson, they still put up like 15,000 passing yards. They have really good just quality over all their players. This makes them a serious contender in the quarterback university debate. The final candidate is Michigan. Now, Jim Harbaugh is really actually the first kind of quarterback from Michigan to throw a pass in the NFL, believe it or not. And he was played in the 90s. But since then, they've had 12 NFL quarterbacks, and Jim Harbaugh isn't the reason why they're a candidate. It is because of Tom Brady and all his accolades really just boosts the team so high. And they really rank high in a lot of accolade aspects, such as Super Bowl MVPs, they're first place in Super Bowl MVPs, first place in Super Bowl starts. They're pretty high in Pro Bowls. They're pretty good in a lot of things, which makes them a serious contender, mainly because of Tom Brady. They've had a couple other Pro Bowl quarterbacks, but he's really the driving standpoint. So now I will officially name quarterback university according to my studies. Third place actually is the University of Michigan, and second place, it's the University of Notre Dame, meaning that Purdue University can also be called quarterback U.